Alright guys, in this video we are going to walk through the installation process of our Can-Am Maverick X3 Stage 3 kit. Now in this kit we provide you with a PMX dash kit along with the necessary mounting hardware and wiring harnesses, our PMX2 digital marine receiver, upper speaker panels which is designed to accept our 6.5-inch prime marine speakers, our 8-gauge full wiring harness for the amplifier, including speaker wire, our amplifier mounting bracket, a TM400X4AD marine amplifier, our underseat subwoofer enclosure, as well as our prime 10-inch marine subwoofer. Now to get started with the install of this kit, the first thing we need to do is remove the upper dash panel that covers the fuse block. All right, so now that we have the panel removed, we're ready to go ahead and locate the 2 holes that we need to drill to secure the dash assembly at the front of the dash itself. This is going to be where we screw in the 2 provided threaded screws that come with the kit. Now, in most of the Can-Am X3 models, you'll see 2 small indentions molded into the dash. This locates where we want to go ahead and drill the holes using an 1/8" drill bit. In case your vehicle does not have these indentions, you can use the dash kit itself as a guide by laying it in place and simply marking through the 2 bolt holes. Once they're marked, go ahead and drill through. Now that we have the holes drilled, we're ready to go ahead and start the assembly of the dash kit itself. To do this, we'll need to locate the dash kit, our PMX2 carrier tray, and of course our PMX2 radio. To start the assembly process, you're going to take the carrier tray provided in the kit, and you're going to mount this into the dash kit assembly itself. All right, with the carrier tray installed, we're ready to go ahead and install our PMX2 radio. Do this using the 4 remaining screws that came with the dash kit. Simply insert the PMX2 radio from the back side and install the 4 screws. All right, so now that we have the PMX2 installed in the dash kit, we're ready to move back over to the vehicle to install the main power harness. Now to install the harness, we are going to take the 2-pin black connector with the power and ground wire, and we're going to drop that down through the hole by the fuse block into the lower dash area. Now this connector will plug into a mating 2-pin connector that you'll find underneath the dash. All right guys, so now that we have the power connection made with the PMX radio harness, we're ready to move on to disassemble the upper dash to get it ready to install our new speaker mounting panels. Now to do this, we're going to remove the upper panels located on both the driver and passenger side of the vehicle by removing the appropriate bolts and securing pins. Now we want to make sure we also disconnect any switches located on the driver's side panel, and then we're going to relocate those to the new panel when we're ready to install it. Okay guys, so some things to note when you're disassembling the upper dash panels to prep for your speaker panels. What you'll find is behind the gas cap cover, there will be a 10mm nut that attaches one of the primary bolts. You'll need to remove the bolt and nut assembly to be able to get the passenger side dash panel out. Additionally, on the driver's side, you may want to remove the two T27 bolts that hold the center upper dash assembly in place. This will loosen it up, giving you some slack to be able to pull the panel out from underneath because of the flange that's molded into the side of it. Additionally, be aware that there is also a panel pin mounted underneath the dash that's not easily visible from above. Once we have the panels out, you'll want to move your switches from the driver's side factory panel over to your new speaker panel. And you'll also notice that there's two retaining clips on each panel where the factory pin clips go into. You will need to remove these and move them over to the new panels so when you place the pin clips back in, they have something to lock into. All right guys, now that we have that done, we're ready to continue the disassembly process. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the passenger front and rear seat out of the vehicle. This will give us access to the transmission tunnel where we're going to run our wiring. Now, one thing to note, the nuts that hold the seats in place as well as the seat belt receivers are torqued on. So you will most likely need a strong breaker bar or even an impact gun to get these off your vehicle. Just be ready. All right, so now that we have the seats out, we've gained access to the transmission tunnel. Next thing we need to do is remove the cover panels along the side of the tunnel. This is going to allow us a space to be able to run our wiring through. All right, so now that we have the passenger side disassembled, we're ready to move over to the driver's side. Next thing is to remove the driver's seat out of the vehicle, and this is going to give us room to mount our subwoofer enclosure. Now the driver's seat does also have a seat belt sensor plugged into it, so you'll need to make sure that before you just pull it out of the vehicle that you unplug the sensor cable. All right, so now that we have the driver's seat out of the vehicle, we're ready to go ahead and start the installation of our primary power harness. Now, the harness that you get with the kit already has pre-terminated connectors and ring terminals on it for connection at the battery and the amplifier that we're going to be installing. It also has our audio harness connected to it. As you see, it's connected via our remote turn-on wire. Now, while you can route the wiring through the transmission tunnel from the battery location with this installed, you may find it easier simply unscrewing the terminal and removing the remote turn-on wire temporarily. Once we have this routed all the way to the front of the vehicle, we're going to reinstall it. All right guys, so now that we have the power and signal cables installed in the vehicle, we're ready to move on to install the subwoofer enclosure. Now the enclosure is designed to mount underneath the driver's seat. The front of the enclosure is identified by the Rockford Fosgate logo, and this rounded area will align with the cross tube assembly that the front of the driver's seat mounts to. It is designed to slide underneath the mounting brackets, and understand that because of different manufacturing tolerances, this fit may be somewhat tight. So you may need a little extra pressure, if you will, to slide this underneath, but it will fit. Once it's in place, you're ready to start the mounting process. Now that we've got the subwoofer enclosure in place, we're ready to start securing it. First thing you're going to do is take the two short screws included with the kit and mount those through the seat brackets into the brass bushings located on top of the enclosure. With those two screws in place, we're ready to install our self-tapping screws on the left side bracket. These will align with two holes that are already in the frame rail assembly. Simply install and they'll cut the threads as you screw them in. All right, now we're ready to install the remaining 4 bolts to secure the enclosure. Now these bolts are designed to mount through the floor pan of the vehicle. So you will need to utilize a 1/4-inch drill bit and drill through the holes that are in the bottom of the enclosure through the floor pan of the vehicle. Then you're going to install the bolts from the bottom side up into the enclosure and secure the nuts from the inside. All right, so now that we have the sub enclosure secure in the vehicle, we're ready to prep the subwoofer to go in the enclosure itself. Now, included with the kit, you get a jumper wire. This jumper wire is going to connect the 2 voice coils of our dual voice coil woofer together. We're wiring these together to create a 4 ohm load at the amplifier. To do this, you're going to locate your jumper wire, and you're going to connect the ground or black terminal on one side to the red or positive terminal on the opposite side. This will leave you 2 remaining terminals available. These terminals will connect to the like colored wires that you're going to find in the enclosure. At this point, we're ready to take the woofer over and mount it in the box. With the sub installed, the last thing we need to do is connect our subwoofer enclosure cable. Now the 2-pin waterproof connector plugs into the side of the enclosure. Then we're going to route the cable underneath the transmission tunnel trim panel to the passenger side and route it up into the driver's side dash area, just like we did the power cable. Alright guys, at this point we're ready to go ahead and install our amplifier mounting bracket. Now the bracket mounts in a vertical position on the driver's side up underneath the dash near the exterior firewall. You'll know this because the Diamond R logo will be in a vertical position, and it clamps to the outside frame assembly with the included clamps. All right, with the bracket in place, we're ready to go ahead and pre-set up our amplifier controls before we mount it onto the bracket. Now to do this, we're going to set the 2-channel, 4-channel switch to the 4-channel position. We'll set the front crossover switch to the HP or high pass position. The rear crossover switch will be set to LP or low pass. And both crossover frequency controls will be set at approximately 80 Hertz. The 2 PEQ adjustments will be left in their full counterclockwise or down position. And the output level controls will leave in their 12 o'clock position until we do the final tuning on the amp. To mount the amplifier to the bracket, we're going to position it so the controls are toward the driver's seat in an upward position, using the 2 holes at the farthest back point, aligning the front of the amplifier with the mating 2 holes. Alright guys, so now that we have the amplifier mounted, we can go ahead and make the power and speaker input and output connections. On the forward side by the firewall, we'll connect the power connector, as well as the subwoofer and front speaker output. On the driver's side on the amplifier, we'll connect our front and rear inputs that will be fed from our PMX radio. Alright, so now that we have the inputs and the outputs of the amplifier connected, we're going to go ahead and route our front speaker wire across the dash and make the connections for it into the amplifier output harness. With the speaker connections made, the last thing we need to do before we move on is connect our remote turn-on wire in the amplifier harness to the remote turn-on wire that's found in the radio harness. Lastly, we need to route the RCA cables in the amplifier harness up into the mounting area where our PMX radio is going to be. All right, so now that we have the speaker cables connected and the RCAs ran to the center dash area where the radio is going to mount, we can go ahead and get ready to install our upper speaker panels. Now, before we do that, we are going to clean up some of the wiring underneath the dash, simply because once the panel's in place, we won't easily be able to get to it. All right, so next we're ready to go ahead and install our speakers into the speaker panels. Now you'll notice we didn't secure the panels down just in case we need to get underneath them during our testing cycle. Once we've tested the system, made sure everything's working properly, we'll go ahead and reinstall all the hardware, securing them in place. Now that we have the speakers connected and mounted, we're ready to go ahead and make the connections at the PMX radio and dash kit. Now we're going to be connecting the multi-pin power connector, as well as the front and rear RCA connections that provide signal over to our amplifier. Once we have the connections made, we're going to set the radio and dash kit in place, where we're going to wait to mount it until, again, we have everything tested, making sure it's working properly. All right, so now that we have the radio connected, we're ready to go ahead and make the power and ground connection at the battery. Once we have that done, we can turn the system on, adjust the amplifier, and make sure everything is working properly. All right guys, so now that we've tested the system, made sure everything's working properly, we can go ahead and start the reassembly process. We'll zip tie all our wires, securing it in place. Go ahead and get the panels secure and the seats back in. All right, so now that we have everything back together, we're going to do one last final test on the system and make any adjustments necessary. After that, we're pretty much ready to get this vehicle back out on the road. All right guys, that pretty much wraps it up. As you can see, the install was pretty straightforward to do with a little bit of work. As always, if you have any questions during the install, feel free to give our tech guys a call or check out our website for more information. As always, we hope you found this video informative, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one.